AITA for kicking out my best friend 48 hours before my penthouse was demolished? My name is Bennett, and at 35 years old, I am a real estate developer who learned the hard way that misplaced charity is the quickest path to making mortal enemies. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal of Samantha, my best friend since college, whom I rescued exactly 12 months ago. She showed up crying at my door at 3 in the morning with 2 broken suitcases and a heartbreaking story about how her boyfriend had thrown her out and she had nowhere else to go. So, with a heavy heart and ignoring the warnings of my own fiancée, Adeline, I offered her a temporary stay in the penthouse of my family's legacy property, the Monroe Building. It was an architectural gem from the 80s in the heart of Chicago, inherited from my grandfather, which I kept vacant as a long-term investment. The apartment was a sprawling 3,000-square-foot dream with marble floors, gold-plated fixtures, and panoramic views of the city that could easily command $10,000 a month in rent. But I gave it to her for free, with no lease, no security deposit, and I even paid the utilities myself so she could get back on her feet financially. That was a huge mistake. What was supposed to be a 2-week stay turned into a year of pathetic excuses. Every time I asked when she was planning to move out, Samantha had a new tragedy. I lost my job. My cat needs surgery. I have seasonal affective disorder. And like a fool, I would nod and give her more time. But that time ran out last Monday when I finally closed the deal of a lifetime and needed the building to be completely empty. So, I went to the apartment with Adeline to give her the news and ask her to vacate within 24 hours. But when I tried to put my key in the lock, it would not turn. Samantha had changed the high-security lock without my permission. I rang the doorbell insistently until she opened it, but she did not look like someone in crisis. She was wearing a silk robe that had belonged to my mother, which she had taken from a locked closet. She was holding a glass of my best reserve wine and looked at me with arrogant annoyance, as if I were an unwelcome door-to-door salesman. "Bennett, what are you doing here without calling? It is rude to interrupt my nap," she snapped, blocking the entrance with her body. "Samantha, you changed the lock. And what do you mean, without calling? This is my property, and I am here to tell you that you have to leave. I am marrying Adeline in 2 months, and I have sold the building. I need the keys now." Samantha let out a cold, cruel laugh that chilled my blood. She took a sip of wine and leaned against the doorframe with a self-satisfied smirk. "Oh, Bennett, always so naive. You see, I was consulting with a legal aid attorney, and it turns out that since I have been living here for over 30 days and receive mail at this address, I am legally considered a tenant with possession rights. It does not matter that I do not pay rent. It is called tenancy at will. And the law says you cannot kick me out without a formal eviction process, which can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months in this city." I was paralyzed. "Are you kidding me? I gave you a roof over your head when you were on the street. I paid for your electricity, water, and internet, and now you want to steal my apartment." Adeline tried to intervene. "Samantha, please, have some dignity. Bennett helped you when no one else would." But Samantha slammed the door in Adeline's face and yelled from inside, "If you try to enter, I will call the police and report you for trespassing and harassment. I have rights. Get out of my home." I pounded on the door in a fury. "Open this door right now, Samantha. This is insane." And sure enough, 5 minutes later, 2 police cars arrived. Samantha came out crying, putting on an Oscar-worthy performance, claiming I was an obsessive ex-boyfriend trying to force his way in to cause her harm. The officers, seeing my yelling and her fake tears, ordered me to back away. "Sir, this is a civil matter. If she resides here, you cannot remove her by force or change the locks. If you bother her again, we will have to arrest you. You have to go to court and file for an eviction." I saw Samantha's triumphant smirk over the police officer's shoulder. That, look made my stomach turn. Adeline was crying from helplessness in the car. "We cannot wait 18 months, Bennett. The sales contract has a closing deadline this week," she said. But far from being defeated, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I pulled out my phone and reread Clause 14 of the sales agreement I had signed that very morning with Apex Urban Development, an aggressive corporation that had bought the entire lot, not to remodel, but to tear it down and build a gigantic shopping mall. And I remembered a legal technicality that Samantha and her hack lawyer had overlooked. Tenant protection laws shield against eviction by a landlord for residential use. but they are automatically nullified if the building is declared an imminent structural hazard or if a municipal demolition permit was approved prior to the disputed occupancy. And I had that demolition permit approved 6 months ago, long before Samantha decided to barricade herself inside. I smiled at the police officers. You are right, officers. I apologize for the trouble. I will let the law run its course. I got into the car with Adeline, who looked at me, confused. We are leaving? You are just going to let her stay? No, Adeline, I replied, starting the engine. I am going to let her stay for as long as she wants. Until Wednesday at 8 in the morning. I drove straight to the offices of the power and water companies. Hi, I am the owner of the Monroe building. I am here to request a definitive disconnection and removal of the meters due to imminent demolition. The clerk at the counter typed on her computer. Of course, sir. I see you have the major works permit. We will proceed with cutting off the utilities in 1 hour. Then, I called the demolition foreman, a man named Rocco who truly enjoyed his work. Rocco, the building is all yours starting now. The contract says it needs to be delivered at ground level by Friday, so you can start with Phase 1, the removal of access points and perimeter windows, tomorrow morning. And if there is someone inside? Rocco asked. Legally, the building is vacant and condemned. If someone is inside, they are a trespasser in a high-risk zone. You just follow safety protocol. Surround the building with fences, put up warning sirens, and start hammering the foundations. I think the vibrations will do the rest. I hung up and looked at Adeline. Samantha wants to play queen of the castle. Well, let's see how much she likes her marble palace when there is no electricity, no water, no elevator, and when a 2-ton wrecking ball starts kissing the walls of her bedroom tomorrow at dawn. Samantha thought she had won a year of free rent, but in reality, she had just voluntarily checked herself into an urban demolition zone where the only law that applies is gravity. Barely an hour after leaving the utility company offices with the signed cutoff order, I was sitting in a restaurant, having a quiet dinner with Adeline, when my phone started vibrating insistently. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, looking at the contact name I had just saved, Samantha the squatter. I imagined the scene in the penthouse, the central air conditioning shutting down in the middle of a heat wave, the crystal chandeliers flickering to death, and the $10,000 smart refrigerator becoming a lukewarm coffin for her gourmet food. You're an absolute monster, Bennett. Samantha screamed on the other end of the line, her voice dripping with pure venom. You cut the power and water. I know it was you. My lawyer says this is coercion and denial of essential services, and we are going to sue you for triple damages. Turn everything back on right now, or I will damage the pipes. I took a sip of wine and replied with exasperating calm. You are mistaken, Samantha. I did not cut anything. I am no longer the account holder for those services because, as I told you, the building is in the process of being decommissioned for demolition. The utility companies automatically cut service when a property is classified as a collapse risk. And by the way, I suggest you do not damage the pipes, because without running water, the only thing you will accomplish is creating a serious plumbing issue in your own shelter. I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone to get a good night's sleep. But the real nightmare for Samantha began at 5:45 the next morning, as the sun was just peeking over the city and the dawn silence was brutally shattered by the roar of 6 heavy-duty diesel engines parking in front of the Monroe building's entrance. I woke up early and drove to the site, parking at a safe distance to watch the show. I watched as the Apex development crew, led by Rocco, a man who looked like he was made of granite, began to set up a perimeter fence of 10-foot-high steel panels, blocking the main exit and garage access, and hanging yellow and black signs that read, Danger, Demolition Zone. Keep out. Samantha must have heard the racket because I saw her peek out from the 20th floor balcony, wrapped in sheets, looking small and insignificant against the tower crane being assembled on the street. She tried to yell at them, but the sound of jackhammers breaking up the sidewalk asphalt to disconnect the gas line drowned out her screams. She pulled out her phone, and seconds later, my phone rang. This time it was her attorney, an arrogant man named Hector Ramirez. Mr. Bennett, this has gone too far, he barked. There is heavy machinery blocking my client's exit. That is false imprisonment. We are calling the police right now. Go ahead, counselor, I replied, laughing. But before you embarrass yourself, I suggest you check the county property registry, updated this morning at 8 o'clock. The Monroe building no longer legally exists as a residence. Its certificate of occupancy was revoked yesterday afternoon. It is now an active construction site, and your client, by being inside an industrial safety perimeter without a helmet, vest, or authorization, is violating occupational safety laws and the penal code for trespassing in a high-risk zone. The police are not going to arrest workers for doing their job with a valid municipal permit. They are going to remove your client for endangering the operation. I hung up and saw Samantha run towards the elevator in the penthouse. But, of course, without electricity, the elevator was a dead box. Her only option was the 20-story emergency stairwell, dark and unventilated. But in her infinite stubbornness, she decided not to come down. She decided to hold her ground, thinking it was a game of chicken and that I would blink first. A grave error. At 9 in the morning, Rocco gave the order over the radio. Phase 1 initiated, facade clearing. A crane with a hydraulic claw rose towards the lower floors. It did not attack the main structure yet, but it started ripping off the balconies of the first and second floors as if they were made of paper. The noise was deafening. The building vibrated like there was a constant earthquake. Samantha came out to the balcony again, this time terrified, waving a makeshift white flag, which was one of my expensive dress shirts. But Rocco had strict orders. The building is vacant according to the paperwork. Any movement in the windows is just a reflection or birds. So the machinery kept roaring. Dust began to rise, covering the penthouse in a suffocating gray cloud. And I knew that in that moment, Samantha was understanding that tenant law protects against abusive landlords, but it does not protect against the inevitable force of a 10-ton wrecking ball that has a date with destiny. And the best part was, since I had already cashed the $15 million check from the sale, every minute she delayed the work, the penalty fee was not for me, but for the demolition company, which had zero patience and far less diplomatic methods than mine for dealing with pests. Samantha's stubborn resistance lasted exactly 6 hours under the acoustic and seismic siege of the heavy machinery. At 2 in the afternoon, with an internal temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit due to the lack of air conditioning and with plastered dust falling from the ceiling onto her stolen furniture like toxic snow, her will broke. It broke right along with the main bathroom pipe, which burst from the vibrations, flooding the marble hallway she loved so much. I saw her come out onto the balcony one last time, not to insult, but to scream. "I am coming down. Stop the machines." But Rocco, following my instructions to the letter, pretended not to hear her over-the-engine noise and ordered the power of the jackhammer at the building's base to be increased. This forced Samantha to undertake the most humiliating escape of her life. The descent on foot from the 20th floor through a dark, narrow, debris-filled emergency stairwell, carrying not her own suitcases, but 2 giant trash bags where she had hastily tried to stuff my antique silverware collection and my watches, driven by her greed until the very last second. It took her an agonizing 40 minutes to get down, stumbling in the dark, sweating profusely, and ruining her designer shoes. And when she finally emerged into what used to be the luxurious lobby of the Monroe building, she found a moonscape of destruction. The glass doors were gone. The reception desk was a pile of splintered wood, and in the middle of the dust cloud stood Rocco, a 6'5" giant in a yellow hard hat, blocking her path with a predator's grin. "You are animals," Samantha shrieked, covered in white dust from head to toe, coughing and dragging the clinking bags. "You could have gotten me seriously injured up there. Open the fence. I am getting out of this disaster zone." But Rocco did not move an inch. "Hold it right there, ma'am," his voice boomed. "You are trespassing in an active level 4 demolition zone. And according to the safety protocol I signed with the owner, no movable materials or assets can leave the perimeter without a prior inspection to prevent theft of worksite property." Samantha's face went pale under the layer of dust. "This is my property. Let me pass." "I do not think so," Rocco interjected, gently kicking one of the bags, which made an unmistakable metallic sound. "That sounds like property of the building. And since the building is now scrap material owned by Apex Development, you are technically trying to steal from the company." Samantha tried to run for the exit, but 2 workers blocked her path. "You have 2 options, ma'am. Either you leave the bags here and walk out through the security gate with what you are wearing, or we call the police to inspect the contents of those bags, and you can explain why you have the former owner's silverware." Samantha looked towards the street, where I was leaning against my car with my arms crossed, watching her through the fence. She saw she had no escape. She saw her attorney was no longer answering his phone because he had realized that defending a squatter in a condemned building was professional suicide. And with a scream of pure frustration that could be heard over the drills, she dropped the bags on the floor. "Keep your junk," she yelled and ran for the exit. Passing through the security lane the workers opened for her, humiliated, dirty, sweaty, and empty-handed. When she crossed the fence and reached the public sidewalk, she collapsed to her knees, gasping, perhaps expecting me to run and help her, for the old Bennett to appear and save her again. But I simply drove closer, rolled down my car window, and said, "Samantha, you look terrible. You should go home and take a shower." "Oh, wait, you do not have a home." And the plumbing in the penthouse was just disconnected from the city grid. She looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "I am going to sue you, Bennett. I swear I am going to take every last cent you have." "Do it," I replied, smiling. "But do it fast, because I just transferred all my liquid assets to an offshore account in preparation for my honeymoon. By the time your lawsuit reaches a judge, I will be in Bora Bora, and this building will be a parking lot." I started the car and left her there, sitting on the sidewalk, watching as the crane's hydraulic claw delivered the first fatal blow to the penthouse structure, shattering the panoramic window from which she used to look down on the city with such arrogance. Her supposed tenant rights had been crushed by the physical reality of a demolition ball, and all she had left was the dirty clothes on her back and the lesson that you should never bite the hand that gives you shelter, especially if that hand is also holding the detonator. 8 months after Samantha was driven from my property like a refugee covered in plaster dust, I stood at the altar of a private chapel on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, waiting for Adeline to walk towards me to become my wife, surrounded by loyal friends and family who truly loved us. It was a stark contrast to the parasitic toxicity I had eliminated from my life along with the Monroe Building. But the real victory was not just the "I do" under the Mediterranean sun, but the call I received from my attorney just before the ceremony, confirming that Samantha's legal nightmare had reached its most devastating and just conclusion. You see, after being removed by the brute force of demolition, Samantha, in her delusions of grandeur and financial desperation, made the fatal mistake of following the advice of an incompetent public defender and filed a civil lawsuit against me for punitive damages, wrongful eviction, and emotional distress, demanding $500,000 in compensation, claiming the demolition was an act of premeditated psychological harm. What she did not know was that I, anticipating her move, had hired a team of private investigators who spent the last few weeks tracking Samantha's every financial and social move during her free stay in my penthouse. And what they found was pure dynamite. Samantha was not in crisis or unemployed as she had claimed to me for a year. We discovered she had been subletting 2 of the rooms in my apartment on Airbnb under a fake profile called Luxury in the Sky, charging unsuspecting tourists $200 a night and pocketing nearly $40,000 in tax-free cash, while I paid her electricity and water bills. When my attorney presented the Airbnb records and tourist testimonies to the judge during the preliminary hearing, Samantha's face transformed from the arrogance of a victim to the absolute terror of a criminal caught red-handed. The judge, a stern man who despised abuse of the legal system, not only dismissed her lawsuit with prejudice, preventing her from ever suing again, but also accepted my countersuit for fraud, unjust enrichment, and property damages for the lock and the broken marble. He ordered Samantha to pay back the $40,000 she had illegally earned, plus another $15,000 for my legal fees, a judgment that guaranteed her total and perpetual bankruptcy. Today, as I cut our 5-tier wedding cake, I know Samantha is not celebrating. The last I heard, with a record of a contentious eviction and a fraud conviction on her public record, no decent real estate agency will rent her even a storage unit. She lives in a seedy motel on the outskirts of the city, working double shifts at a call center to pay the wage garnishment the court ordered to repay me. But the final, definitive closure of the cycle happened last week when I returned from my honeymoon for the grand opening of the Emerald Tower, the modern, gleaming structure that Apex Development built on the ruins of my old building. I was invited as a guest of honor to the ribbon cutting, and as I strolled through the new marble hallways, cooled by air that smelled of lavender, I decided to grab a coffee at the new gourmet cafe on the second floor, right around where the kitchen of the old penthouse used to be. And there, wiping tables in a brown uniform with an expression of infinite bitterness, was her. Samantha. It turns out her only job option was to work for the cleaning company that services the building constructed on top of her former palace. When she saw me walk in, dressed in a tailored Italian suit and accompanied by my pregnant wife, she froze, a dirty rag in her hand. Our eyes met, and for a second, I saw she was about to say something. Maybe an insult, maybe a plea. But she glanced at her supervisor watching her from the counter and lowered her head, returning to scrubbing a coffee stain on the table, finally understanding her place in the world. I walked to the counter, ordered a double espresso, and left a $100 bill in the tip jar. Not out of generosity, but as a cruel reminder that the money she tried to steal from me, I now give away as spare change. I walked out of the mall into the afternoon sun, knowing that every time Samantha looks out the windows of that place, she will not see the future, but the ghosts of the life she lost to her own greed. And I, finally free from the burden of the past, got into my car, knowing that sometimes the best way to clean up your life is to bring in a wrecking ball and start over from the rubble of betrayal. Comment. This story is a powerful reminder of how complicated relationships can become. It shows that being kind to others should never require you to be unkind to yourself. Setting firm boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is the ultimate form of self-respect. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones we make to protect our peace and our future. We are all responsible for the energy we allow into our lives and the standards we set. True strength is not about getting even, but about having the courage to clear away what is broken and build something new. Healing means becoming the architect of your own new beginning. I hope this encourages you to reflect on the boundaries that safeguard your well-being. Always choose the path that honors your growth and protects your inner peace. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.